Hmm.
You got to keep expanding the territory. You got to be like America. Ugh. All right, so okay, let's go. Busy with it. All right. All right, so we're at this point in Mestillat Yasharim. We're in chapter 11. So I guess there's like in just chapter 11, there's like seems like there's over 100 sections of thought by the Ram Call, and so we've just been going through every single one of them. It's taking us a few days, but we're here. But we're at the part where he's speaking about the power of truth, right? Because this whole idea is that we want to acquire these character traits that are going to allow us to connect to God at the highest level, to achieve the highest pleasure in all things that we do. In the challenges that we experience, we'll even see the blessings in that. But we have to obtain these things. So now in this concept of truth, Vechamim Zikaronam Libracha Ve'amon. So it says in Shabbat, and hey, so it says like this. So it says, our sages in blessed memory said, the seal of the Holy One, blessed be He, is truth. It says in Shabbos. And it says, if truth is what the Holy One, blessed be He, has selected as his seal, then undoubtedly the great abomination is the opposite. How much the opposite must be, right? So truth is a connection to God, and the opposite is opposite of God. Vehezi here Hakadosh Baruch Hu ala ha'emet. Ma'az harab rabba ve'amru. So it says, and the Holy One, blessed be He, extorted us greatly on speech, extorted us greatly on speaking of truth, such as let a man speak the truth to his neighbor. In mercy, the throne shall be established, and he shall sit upon it in truth. It says now Isaiah, and for he said, surely they are my sons who that will not lie, and who teaches you that one depends on the other. Vema rove nikara love Yushalayim ir ha'emet leha gadil chashvuta sorry chashivuta Chashivuta. All right, all right. So he says, and I have returned to Zion. He's reading from Zechariah. I returned from Zion, and I will dwell amongst Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth. It says in Zechariah. And he says, and to magnify his importance in our and to magnify the and our sages of blessed memory said in Masechet Makot, who speaks truth in his heart. And it says, like it says like Rav Safra would teach. He says to teach you just how far reaching the obligation of truth extends. So being truthful is everything, and we have to remind ourselves of that. And we were saying it not from the frame of like Bately, uh, uh, um, saying something that's wrong, right? We're not. We're saying, but even like small little intricate things, you know what I mean? Like something you may not know for sure. You're assuming, but you're saying it more in the places you know for sure. You know what I mean? You got to be very specific about making sure like everything that you're coming to is from strength. It says, "U kevar asur le talmid chacham vele leshenot beri sorry bedir bor chutz mishelisha mishelosha." So he says like this, Devarim. So he says, the sages forbid a Torah scholar to alter his words except for three things. Ve'achad min ha'amudim ve'ha'olam omed alav hu ha'emet. He says, truth is on one pillar which one stands, what the world stands. Says this in Pirkei Avot. And he says, furthermore, one who speaks falsely is as if he removes the foundation of the world. And conversely, one who is scrupulous in truth, it is as if he uphold the foundation of the world. Ukevar sipu chachamim zikaronam lebracha. She says, in our sages of blessed been reported in Sanhedrin of a certain town whose inhabitants were so heedful of truth that the angel of death had no dominion over them. And because of the wife of a certain rabbi changed her word, even through her intention was good, the angel of death began to prevail over them. And they expelled her from there due to this. I thought we read this before. They expelled her. They expelled her from there due to this, and from their former tranquility was restored. Man, they kicked the rabbi's wife out. They kicked her out. So he says, "Ve'in serig leharika bi daver hazeh shekel mechayavo." So he says, and there's no need to elaborate further on this topic. He says, "It's no need to elaborate further on this topic for reasons dictated in this knowledge. In this, reasons dictated this, and knowledge forces it." He said, "Reason dictates and knowledge forces it." Yeah, I get it. So he says, "Anafe mechilu Hashem v'gam kinahem rabim ugadolim ki haribe sirik ha'adam." Lehayot. So he says like this: the profane of God's name. He says the branches of sin of the profane of God's name. He says Kulan Hashem. He says are numerous and great. For a person must be exceedingly concerned of of his master's honor. In anything he does, he must look in. All right. So this topic is the profane the name of God. Okay. He said the branches of sin of profaning God's name are also numerous and great. He says, for a person must be exceedingly concerned of his master's name in everything he does, and he must look and contemplate exceedingly that there is will not such come out of this something which causes profane in the honor of God's name, heaven forbid. Ubi kaver sheninu achad shogeg ve'acheg mezid. He says we have learned. He says this in Pirkei Avot. We have learned whether one has acted in the error or whether he has acted deliberately in it all at one. That the same were the results of the desecration of God's name. ואמרו זיכרונם לברכה, Heiki Dame Kilula Chip. So he's asking a question. He's saying, our sages of blessed memory asked the question, what constitute profaning the name of God? And Rob said, for example, if I were to take meat from the butcher and not pay him at once. Okay, wow. He says, and Rav Yochanan said, in the case it is profane if I walk 4 cubits without a Torah and tefillin. Well, that's hardcore, no? So he says, "Ve hayinan shakil ha'adam lepi dam regeto ulefi ma shehu." So he says the explanation of the matter is that every person, according to his level, in accordance to what he is considered in the eyes of his generation, must be mindful to not do something which not fitting of someone like him. The greater his importance and the wisdom, and the greater he needs to increase watchfulness, and meritoriousness. I'm not saying that right. In the divine service. If he fails to do so, behold, the name of heaven will profane through him, and God forbid, for it is an honor to him, the Torah, and the one who increases study in it should also increase uprightness and refinement of character traits of lacking in this among those who increase studies in the Torah brings disgrace to the study itself. This is, God forbid, a profane of God's name, blessed He, who gives us His holy Torah and commanded us to toil in order to achieve our perfection through it. Let's keep going. Vehine gam shemirat she'ebakot veyamim tovim rabah. So he says Shabbat in the holy observance. He says guarding Shabbat in the holy observance is also severe, for the laws are very numerous. And our sages said this is a great law of the Sabbath. ואפילו דברי החשיבות אף על פי שמא דדרי חכמים מהם. So he says, even though the resting, despite that they are nevertheless important principles, as the sages say. Never let the principle of Shavuot rest be light in your eyes, for laying on of the hands of the sacrifice of the festival day. This as prohibited on account of the rest. Hold on, let me see what this is saying here. So Shavut, like to rest. Okay, so he's saying Shavut to rest is the light in your eyes. He says, in laying on the hands on the sacrifice of the festival days is prohibited only on account of the Shavut. Yet some of the greatest men in the age debated thereon. All right, I'm not exactly clear what they're saying right here. Ah, so he's saying this idea of like resting on the holidays in Shabbat. He's saying some people say a lot of it is rabbinical ordinance, but he says some of the sages in Masechta Hagiga debate on this. So he says, "Ve'olam parete mahadinim le cham otam avor rim him atzel haposokim." So he says like this. And so he says, in details, he says the laws according to their differences are explained by the halakha deciders, the poskim in their book. All of these details are equal of all of us with respect of their obligation and re-rescuance, watchfulness. He says that which is difficult on a mass to guard is abstaining from business, occupation, and conversation. All right. So anyway, so he says the details of these laws, right? So he's talking about the laws of keeping these days, right? To control. In the way he explains it, he says when you're doing this, you are. All right. So it's interesting. So he's saying like this. So he's saying this idea of being Shomer Shabbat, right? So he says, so he brings the first thing he brings here is from the sector Shabbos, right? And it says guarding Shabbat and the holy days observance is also revered from the laws of very numerous. But our sages says this great law, but the great law of Shabbat. are severe, for the laws are very numerous. Okay, so these are laws of Shah. So he says, even though the resting Sharut, despite that they are rabbinical, are nevertheless important principles, as the sages say. Never let the principle of the Sharut be light in your eyes, for laying on the hands on a sacrifice for a festival day is prohibited on account of Sharut. He says, when a great, he said, but he says, yet the great men of grace simply debated this. Okay, so he reads up from Hagiga. So he's saying over here now, he's saying the details of these laws, according to the differences, are explained by the halacha deciders, the poskim. And he says, and in their books, all of these details are equal for all of us will with respect in their obligation and their request of watchfulness. He says, which is difficult on a mass to guard is he says, which is difficult on the mass to guard is abstaining from business, occupations, and conversations. He says this prohibition is stated in the words of the prophet Isaiah. If you honor it, abstaining from your own ways, not pursuing your affairs and speaking words about them, the general principle is that whatever is forbidden to do on Shabbat is forbidden to strive after or mention verbally. Okay. We got that. So he's making this connection to watchfulness and keeping Shabbat and the holidays. He says Vela kena asuru le ayan be nikasa. So he says hence our sages forbid one to examine his property to see what is needed for tomorrow. He says, or walk on the border of the province in order to leave quickly after nightfall for the bathhouse. And the sages forbid one to say, I will do such and such tomorrow, or the such and such merchandise I will buy tomorrow, or the likes. So all these things are forbidden in terms of speech. Vehine ada ahinama devarati mina katsat. So he says, "Ha mitzvot ma Hashem amru ro'im." So thus, I have spoken on of the mitzvot which we can see most stumbles in. From these, we can apply what we learn to all the negative precepts. For there is no Torah prohibition which is not certain branches and details of some severe or some less. One can aspires to cleansing must be clean and pure of all of them. So he's bringing the halakha and he's showing that, hey, we were talking about midot before, in different character traits. Now he's going actually into the halacha itself and saying that by following the halacha and restraining against these things, restraining against these 365 negative mitzvahs, by staying away from them, we actually are expressing an aspect of removal, right? And thus revealing cleanliness. Ukevar ve'amru zikaronam libracha Shenaik ke der achalim. So he says our sages have already said in Shir Hashir, your teeth are like a flock of eels. Not one among them has lost its young. Just as an eel is modest, so too were Israelites modest and virtuous in the war with Midian. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav Akka, not one of them put on the head tefillin before the arm tefillin. For if one of them had done so, Moshe would have not praised them. They would have not come out of the war in peace. All right, let's keep going. So it says, "Ve'kim ve'amru Yushalmi." Okay, so he stated between. He says one who speaks Yishtabak and Azar, and he says has a sin on his hand and leaves his hand in the battlefield. So he's talking about a part in the tefillah. There's two different parts. One yishtabak. He says you speak between these two. He says it's like it's a really bad thing. What's the point? Hare lecha ad hachana sarik lehagia. So he says, and if you see just how far the meticulousness and cleanliness must be truly obtained in one's deeds. Vehine kemo sarik nikiyut mahaba'asim chach sarik nikiyut bemidot. Okay, so he says now he said the cleanliness and character traits. He says, just as the cleanliness is needed to acquire for the deeds, so too cleanliness is needed for character traits. One can almost say that the cleanliness and the character traits is more difficult to acquire than the deeds, saying the mitzvahs. And for the human nature's interference and the traits more than it does in the deeds, and one's natural temperament and disposition can neither greatly aid or greatly impede on this area. Thus, any war waged against one's nature becomes a raging battle. This is what your sages refer to, saying, "Who is mighty? Who has conquered his inclination?" Vehine hamidot hina rabot ki kafi kol hasulot. So he says the character traits are very numerous. Just like there are many different actions that a man can do in the world. So too, there are many characteristics a man's actions are drawn that are drawn after them. So he says, Amnam Kemo, Shei Daver Nu, Ba Mitzvot Shehayad Hasorech. So he says, however, just like we discussed, only those mitzvahs that are most necessary, namely those which people habitually stumble on, so too regarding the character traits, we will discuss the primary traits in greater detail because of our habituation in them. These are arrogance, anger, jealousy, and lust. Mm. In kol ale midot re'od asher re'atam. So nikaret. So he says these are the evil traits whose evil is recognized and well known. No proof is necessary to demonstrate this, for they are both evil in themselves and evil in their consequences. And they are all outside the realm of intellect and wisdom, and each one of them is sufficient by itself to lead a person to severe sins. Al hagi ava mikara male mizhir ve'omer. So he says on arrogance, the scripture explicitly warns, saying, "When your heart will grow haughty and you will forget your Lord, your God." It's real stuff. So he says, ha ka'as mamru v'zikronam libracha. So he says, and on anger, ka'as. So on anger, the sages say it says in Shabbos in the Zohar, I guess, anyone who becomes angry shall be regarded in his eyes as idol worship. So it's an interesting point because, like, we're coming from, if we ever make it to Shar Kedusha, one day we'll make it there, right? But we're learning about his dynamic of how the soul is broken into these two parts of 248 and 365, and not broken, but they express themselves in this way. Like they have these tentacles, right? And so God made the human body to fit like a glove to this soul expression, right? And so as we draw God's light, we're able to send it to all the different parts of our body. And as we deny God, we create blockages, which limits life and actually brings us bad health and maybe even death. So over here, they're saying anger is a dynamic of what? of cutting oneself off from the light force. Total cutting oneself off. The in-depth study necessary in relation to them must be such that one escapes from them in all of their branches, for they are one and all as de, degenerate branches of a strange vine. It says in Yirmiyahu, let us speak on them one at a time. Okay, all right. So these branches of negativity, right? These branches of negativity of uh, yeah. So these negative things of arrogance, anger, jealousy, and lust. So he wants to learn these in depth because he said these are all trees, these are all on branches and they're trees, and these something that every human being, all these things we all have to deal with, all that are on our own level, right? So he's vehine kalala inaina vehagi azvahu. So he says arrogance. Generally, the matter of arrogance is that a man inscribes importance to himself on himself and imagines that he is worthy of praise. ונעם זה יכול לשמש משוואות רבות. So he says, this could grow out of many different reasons. Some people consider themselves highly intelligent. Some people consider themselves handsome. Some people consider themselves important or great or wise. The general principle of the matter is if a person thinks he is possesses any of good things of the world, he is immediately in danger of falling into this pit of arrogance. Akare Shekava Ha'adam Belibo Hayoto Hashuv. So he says, but after a person has fixed his heart, in his heart that he is important and praiseworthy, the consequences of this thought will not be only one thing. Rather, many different outgrowths will result of this, and some even contradictory to the other. But they all stem from the cause and direct of the same end. והנה ימצא גאל אחד שחשוב Belibo Shekivan. So he says, and behold, Hine. So he says, and he says, there is one type of arrogant person who will convince himself that since he is praiseworthy and uniquely distinguished due to his qualities, he as he imagines this it is thus proper that he conducts himself also in a unique and distinguished manner, in a slow manner, whether it is in walking or sitting down or getting up, or whether it's in his speech or gestures, or whether in all of his deeds. He will walk only in a very slow manner, toes touching heels. He will not sit only in a reclining. He will only sit in a reclining chair, and he will get up slowly like a snake. Jeez. And he says, yeah, here we go. He says, and he will not speak to everyone, but rather only to honorable people. And even with them, he will only say short phrases like the Tifarim. And he says, in all the rest of his actions, in his movements, in his deeds, his eating, in his drinking, in his clothing, and all of his other actions, he will conduct himself with great heaviness, as if all of his flesh were lead and his bones were made of stone and sand. So he's saying this arrogance it takes over your mind, and the rest of his action in this moment, his deeds, his eating, his drinking, and his clothing, all in this action, he will conduct himself with great heaviness, and his flesh will lead, and his bones were made of stone. And he says, he says, sorry, וימצא הגאה אחר אחר שהחשוב שלי shehu. So he says there. He said there's another type of arrogant person who thinks that since he's praiseworthy, worthy of praise, he possesses many superior virtues. Therefore, he will quake. He must quake the earth, so everyone will tremble before him. He will not consent that people will participate through a will penetrate through to speak to him nor ask for him something. If they dare ascend up to him, he will confound them with his voice, and he will baffle them, and and with his breath of his lips by answering them harshly. His face will appear grumpy at all times. So it's another type of arrogant person. So he's giving us different persons. So one person we learned a certain type of arrogance is that they're just kind of like these like kind of like people who are like really like high noble type people, right? And they really talk to certain people. They kind of like move around and they're kind of like slimy types, and they feel like they know I've seen this before. And the key thing is to be able to look at these qualities within ourselves. That's the most important thing. He says, and there's another arrogant person who thinks in his heart that he's already great and distinguished inseparable from and is inseparable from him, and he has no needs whatsoever. He says to show this to others, he performs deeds like humble, all the while announcing his traits, trying to appear exceedingly lowly and absolutely humble. But as his heart swells up within him, saying, "I am so exalted and so honorable, and I no longer have any need for honor, and I forego it, and for it is already abundant within me." So he's saying this type of person is like saying, like, I am so humble, I am so pure, I have no needs of anything, I've transcended the physical world, and I am holy and I'm pure, right? So he says, "Ve'yima tse ga'e acher." So he says, and we found another arrogant person who wants to be very renowned for his qualities and his unique ways to point where it is not enough for him to be praised by the whole world for the virtues he thinks he has. Rather, he wants that praise him even more for being the humblest of the humble. Hence, this person prides himself on humility and desires honor for appearing to flee from it. This person will sit his place among those of much lower status than him, or among the disgraceful men, thinking that through this he displays ultimate humility. He does not wish for any titles or of greatness, or refuse all praises and all praises, while saying to himself, "There's no wiser or no humbler than me in the whole world." So he says that. So basically, we're kind of showing us like the main trait of arrogance is when we separate something about ourselves that Hashem gave us to serve Hashem, and we take that and we look at it in the frame of the desire to receive for oneself, right? And so we use it to separate ourselves from other people, right? It says ve amnam geim ka ele afopi shalika ora. Excuse me. So he says, such an arrogant person, through they have appeared to be humble, nevertheless, they lack no stumbling block which with which without their knowledge reveal their arrogance, like the flame which bursts forth between the shards. He says, our sages of blessed memory have already made this analogy on this. This is like a house full of straws. The 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 walls that crack through which the straws enter. After some days, the straws inside the crack begin to emerge outside, and whoever realizes that the house was full of straws, says in Bar He says, "Ken hadever hazeh shelo Yikulo Tamid Hasatid. So he says, so too here, these arrogant men are unable to hide themselves at all times. Their evil thoughts will show it through their actions, in their ways of false humility and deceit of lowliness. Veyimatsu ga'ima akarima sheti sha'ar gazatam. So he says, one may find another arrogant person whose arrogance remains buried in their hearts, and it will not express it in deeds, but they will think in their hearts that they are already a great sage, and who knows things to their true depth. And that not many will ever obtain wisdom like them. Therefore, they will not pay heed to the words of others, thinking that whatever is difficult for them to understand, it will not be easy for others. And he says, likewise, they will think that what their minds dictate is so clear and evident to them that there's no need to consider the views of those who disagree with them. Neither the views of the earlier sages or the latter ones. They could have no doubt on their reasoning. Kol and toldot haga'ava Hamshiva. So he says, and foremost case stems from arrogance, which backtracks the wise and render them foolish, and deprives the hearts of the highest of wisdom. Ve'av ki talmidim shelo shemi ushu kol sarakam. So he says, and how much more so for the disciplines of the sages, who did not sufficiently study from the wise, such that their eyes were almost open and already dimmed themselves equally to the wisest of the wise. The al kulam the anamar, and all and is on all of them it is written, the proud hearts of is an abomination of God. One who wants to reach a trait of cleanliness must clean himself from all of them. He must know and understand that arrogance is literally binding, that whereby a man's intellect fails to see his own deficiency and recognizes his lowliness. She'ilu haya yakol liriod haya makir ve'emet. He says, for if a man were capable of seeing and perceiving truth, he would he would withdraw and distance far away from all of these evils and crooked ways. With all, we will discuss this more with God's help. He says, with God's help, when we arrive at this trait of humility, which is due to a great difficulty in attaining it, which is among the last traits of the ladder of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. Unedaber ve'ata min am hakaas, yeah, hakaas. So he says, anger. Let us now discuss anger. There is a anger-prone person about which our sages say, whomever gets angry is one if he is the idol worshiper. And he says Zohar, he said this person gets angry on anything that doesn't go his will. He becomes filled with wrath till his heart is no longer with them, and his judgment is lost. Vehine ish kaze kadai le kehariv olama male im yokelet beyado. She said, and a man like this would be sufficient to destroy the whole world if he had the ability, for the intellect does not rule over him in the least. He has literally lost his reason, just like all the uh, um, um, predatory beast. And on him it is written that you will tear his soul. In anger shall you become earth shake because of you. Certainly he can easily transgress any type of sin in the world to which his rage leads him. And he says in four he has no other power moving him other than his anger, and he will go wherever it takes him. It's a big love, right? Says Veish Ka'asan Reku. He says Rekuk Mizel Vehu Shelo Al Kol Diver Asher Yevoehu Shelo. So he says, and there's another anger type far from this. This is a person's wrath is not kindled for everyone, everything, small or big, which does not happen according to his will. But when his threshold of anger is reached, he will corrupt in great fury. This is what our sages of blessed memory said: difficult is anger and difficult to appease. He said this is only certain very evil, for great damage may happen, even though, even through him during his interruption of anger, and he will no longer be able to straighten what has been made cooked. So it says, "Veish ka'asama pakut mize shelo yikaas alani kala." So he says, "There's another anger less severe than the previous. He does not come to anger easily, and even if his anger is triggered, it will be only small anger, and it will be straight out of the way. It'll be small anger, and he will not stray out of the ways of reason, but he will harbor his feelings. And this man is less likely to cause harm than previous types, but nevertheless, he certainly has not reached cleanliness for even watchfulness. He has yet reached since as long as the anger marks an impression over him, he has not gone out of the category of a person's anger. Ve'ish oda pakot mizeh. So he says another type even less than this is a type of person is this person is difficult to anger, and has anger does not damage and destroy, rather it is a small anger. How long does his anger last? It lasts only for an instant and not more. And from the time his anger naturally surging is aroused till the time his understanding arises up against it. This is what our sages say. So that's a very important point. So he said, so our anger arises, and then we have this other concept called understanding. So maybe we could understand that as bina, right? So you have this concept of bina that reveals itself when the anger arises, and when the bina reveals itself, right, then the anger is able to subside, right? He says this is what our sages refer to the difficult to anger and easy to appease. Behold, certainly this is a good portion, for it is human nature to be aroused to anger, and to be overpowered, and one's overpowers it, so that even at the moment of anger itself, it will not ignite such, and he overcomes it, so that even this small amount of anger does not linger within him for a long time. Rather, it quickly passes and goes away, and he is certainly worthy of a praise. Ve'amru zikaronam libracha. And he said, the sage of great memory, Saint Kuan, who hangs on the earth on nothing, he says in Yavel, the earth endures on the merits of one who restrains in his mountain during a dispute. Namely, his nature has aroused him to anger, and through strengthening one himself over it, he restrains his tongue. Amnam mi dato shela hila zaken. So he says the level of Hillel the elder, whomever was above, he says however was above all of these, and he did not get upset for anything, no matter whomever whatever whomever, and not even a stirring of anger arose within them. And this is certainly one who is absolutely clean of anger. Vehine afilo. So that's interesting, clean of anger. So that means these different attributes we see of ourselves is because we have some of that filth inside of us. And so as we remove them, as we reject these things, and we say, I'm not participating in that. I'm not walking into that room. I'm not going to open that door. The more we do that, we rid it from ourselves. We get lost. We get caught up. It happens. Vehine afilo. So he said the sages warned us not to get angry even for the sake of a mitzvah. He says, "Ooh, that's interesting." He says, "Not even a teacher with a student or a father with his son. This is not to say he should not chastise them. Rather, he should surely chastise them, but not out of anger, but rather with no other purpose other than guiding them along the right path. Any anger that he shows to them should be only of the face of not anger of the heart." Shlomo says, "Be not quick to the spirit of anger, for anger rests in the heart of fools." And he says, "And it is written, for anger slays the fool." And our sages of blessed memory said, three ways a man is recognized: through his cup, through his wallet, and through his anger. He says, "Ha nakat gama here enama elena chazron." So he says, "Yedia." So he says, jealousy. So wait, so let's stop here on jealousy because hold on, we got to do this thing at 5. I mean 5:30. So I got to dive in between the next class. But just give me some reflections on this.
So I think, it's just letting us know how important it is to be mindful of ourselves, especially in our speech. I was talking about, the trait of truth. And that's why Hashem, that's a seal. And, truth is Teferet, that's the Torah. So, it kind of flowed into like watching your anger, watching your arrogance, having that middle column of Torah in your life that's going to balance out these midot. Especially when it's talking about anger, in the sense that it's human nature to get aroused to anger. Okay, that's fine, but how do you react to these situations and these conditions? I think that's the most important thing. Is, I mean, okay, yeah, let's not to have anger at all. That's a high level. That's what we should you know, um, try to attain. But how do you conduct yourself in the midst of these things? And the example of like Bina coming up, like if you take anger as like being fire, and then you have Bina as water, the water extinguishes that fire, gives you that rebalance, puts you in the right frame of mind. So just being mindful and being aware is very important. And I think not getting down on yourself, that's a form of arrogance. Like, oh, how can I get angry right now? It's like that's the
Mm.
wrong approach to take. It's not how can I get angry, it's how do I react to this anger? What has my path, my study, when I'm studying these midot, when I'm studying Torah, am I allowing these things to permeate within my heart? And now they're acting as a mechanism to, extinguish this fire. And it's a good thing, So it's
Good
just
thing.
putting yourself in the right positions, and it's all about conduct. That's one of the things I try to think about a lot. How am I conducting myself? How am I pivoting in this situation? My soul just, oh, I gotta go this way, I gotta go this way. No, you gotta pivot. So sometimes you gotta ball fake, you gotta up fake. You gotta fake that pass over there to move the defense so you can get a clearer path this way. You know what you're trying to
Right.
accomplish. So yeah, this is where we at. The next one is jealousy. Is that where we stop on jealousy? With that anger, arrogance. Okay.
Yeah, this is powerful stuff, man. This is like it's like it gives us so much strength to work on ourselves and to forgive ourselves. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And be like, all right, man, I slipped up. I should have said that. I should have been like that. It's you get used to everything. It's like, especially like, when you become a rabbi, it's just like everything you say, everything you do, it's like everyone's watching, everything has implications. You can't even chill no more.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's like it's a big thing, like, to be in that. So you have to stay focused on your midot. You have to stay focused on your midot. You have to constantly be learning about midot. You have to constantly be learning about musar, and until you rid yourself of it completely, right? And so that's a challenge, man. That's the work, and that's what brings the shekhinah. When you're in that space, and we have all those parts of arrogance inside of it. It's okay. Just cleanse it out, though. You know what I mean? Just remove it out. Just remove anger. Move it out. Move it out. Just move it out. Hashem, and we know what we're asking Hashem for too. Hashem, remove these things from us. In our tefillah, when we talk to Hashem and we do hashbadadus, Hashem, remove these things from me. Remove them from my heart through mercy. I don't need it through. I don't need it through din.
Right.
Do it through mercy, please. You have to state that. You know what I'm saying? And I see that's one of the ideas around Simchat Torah is it's like this last day, which is like you're wrapping all of the merits and everything, and they should be revealed in Simcha, in mercy, right? So you don't want because God will give it to you through din. We don't want. We're good. We went through mercy. Please forgive us softly. We're doing tshuva. We're asking that you remove these traits from me. Remove this from my heart. Remove this from just remove them from me through mercy at the right speed that only you know what I mean? And that's what I'm on at this season in life. Hashem, you tell me when it's time to do this. You show me what the right situation is. You know what I mean? Like, I've always been making things happen with God in mind. You know what I mean? Like making things God. It wasn't like God was absent. No, it was with God in mind. But I'm in that season where I'm just like, Hashem, I only want the best of the best of every type of sequence, right? And the best means the best for my neshama, right? Not the best in status or anything. I don't know. I want the best that you provide. So I humble myself for Hashem. You do it. You show the light here. Mm, I trust that. I walk forward. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, so yeah, we could do some more tonight, God willing. I got two more today, but we could still just we got to catch up on we got to finish, bro. This is like the longest chapter like in the world. Like this is just like this
Yeah.
is like this is like long distance sprint. It's just like we still got parts to go on this chapter. It's not even like it's like 200 parts. It looks like almost.
That's a marathon.
Yeah, we're in that marathon game. We're on that Kenyan. We're on that Kenyan stroke. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
All
for
right,
sure.
all right. So we'll continue on.